Good morning, everyone, as you're joining us. I'm just going to wait just another moment as more people come in. Right, I think we might get started just because we do like to keep these sessions really short and sharp and really tightly packed so that you can all go back on with your lives after hopefully what's a really insightful hour. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Linda and I'm the Program Development Manager with the Tourism Industry Council of South Australia. I'm really excited to be hosting this session this morning. I'd like to start by just acknowledging that I'm coming to you today from the lands of the Kaurna people, and I'm really proud to live and work on Kaurna country. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present, and I'd like to acknowledge the ongoing cultural connection of Aboriginal peoples of South Australia to the lands and waters of SA. I'd like to acknowledge the elders and the traditional custodians of the lands where you are joining us from today, and extend that respect also to all First Nations people in this great country. Our In Conversation series are short webinars that form part of our business development program. And it's an opportunity to provide our tourism community with insights and advice that can really, have some impact on your business operations and business planning. But also, it's a great opportunity to build your knowledge about different aspects of the tourism industry as well. I'll be asking a number of questions today. It's very much an informal sort of conversation type of a session. And so they're open to your input and questions as well. So please don't hold back if you've got a question. You can either type it into the chat function and I will come to it either as part of discussion or we'll have some Q&A at the end. And you're also very welcome to verbally ask your question as part of that Q&A as well. And we don't, we're not a huge group, so it's a great opportunity if you do want to come off mute that you can jump in and have that conversation with our guests directly. To that end, I would just ask you to keep your microphone on mute just for the time being. And we are recording the session, which is great because it means that if you do need to step away, you can come back, or if there's something that you really want to delve into a little bit deeper and you missed it in your note taking, that you can come back and we'll be sending that link out to you at the end of this session. Today's session in conversation, we're joined by Peter, Jet and Anastasia from Cumulus Studios. Cumulus are a new partner of ours and they're an award-winning architecture firm. I think they're Australia's best architecture firm, and I'm not saying that because I'm biased in any way, about all of the excellent work that they do, but they actually have won an award to that effect. And they focus on architecture, interior and urban design, specialising in tourism and hospitality projects, including, I think, some of the most exciting tourism projects in Australia. And you'll get the opportunity to learn a little bit about them as part of our discussion today. So I'm going to just kick straight into it and just get the Cumulus team to give us a bit of an introduction and also to themselves, to the firm, and also a bit of a one-on-one on architecture on architecture services for tourism operators, just so that we start all off on the same page and we're building on that foundation of a shared knowledge.
Thanks, Linda. Hi, everyone. Thanks for undertaking the acknowledgement of country, and morning to all TICSA members who have joined this morning. So my name is Jet O'Rourke. I'm architect and associate here in the leading the Adelaide studio for Cumulus. I guess to kind of answer that question, Linda, I guess for Cumulus, we're really passionate about creating unexpected spaces that people can really be passionate about. I guess we understand that the world and the tourism space is full of rich and diverse experiences. And so we're really striving to reflect that through architecture. And I guess what we want to kind of get across today is that the responses and how we come to our strategies for projects comes from the minds and ideas and passion of many. So collaboration is really key. Joining me today in the Adelaide studio, we've got Peter Walker, who's one of the founding directors of Cumulus and based in Hobart, and then also Anastasia Mavrides, who's a colleague here in the Adelaide studio.
Awesome, thanks, Jeff. I guess when I was asked to host this session today, I was really excited because I have had the benefit of working with you guys a little bit previously. So I understand a little bit of what you guys do, and you're certainly not a run-of-the-mill architecture business. And I just would love it if you could just tell us a little bit more about what you offer, your roots and expertise within tourism, and the role that you play. Within, you talked about experience there. Tourism is an experience industry. So just the role that architecture can play, because I think we think of it as very much this is the architecture, this is the experience. So the role you play in that experience development.
So when we started Cumulus, I was very fortunate in having a background in tourism. And over the 12 years that we've been operating, we've been very fortunate to be involved in a whole range of projects. I'm based in Hobart, and the practice started in Tassie, but we've been over here in Adelaide for a number of years. And we see a lot of crossover between the way that the two states and the types of environments and the natural environment and the way that we approach tourism. Very, very lucky. Some of the projects that we've been involved in, and they range from really very modest kind of glamping type accommodation retreats through to a number of boutique hotels. And then up to, my project, I was the project lead architect for Sapphire Resort which is one of the premium luxury lodges in Australia. So a really, really wide variety of experience. And out of that experience came a really good understanding of what makes for an interesting visitor experience. We also get involved in, luckily, cellar doors, distilleries, and we've done a couple of lookouts and nature-based kind of things and visitor centres. So a wide range. But we work really closely with tourism operators and our clients to really try and understand what their brand is and how architecture can work with the brand and accentuate the brand and accentuate our clients' values. So the more that we can, from our experience, I guess, the more that those two things can work in harmony, that the architecture really becomes an expression of brand and an expression of those values, an expression of the values of a place, the better, the more cohesive they are, the better the outcome is. And this extends right the way through to the visitor experience. It's not enough for the project really to photograph well, but it needs to leave visitors with a lasting impression, a lasting positive impression that makes them want to share their experience with other people. So research shows that we, in this digital era where we're getting bombarded with lots of information, and advertising, etc., we really take the recommendations of other people really highly, and we trust those recommendations. So having somebody say, I went to so-and-so and I really enjoyed the experience, that's exactly the type of thing. So we want to create those experiences that people want to share with their friends and they want to share with their network and family. And so in that way, you're creating ambassadors for your product, which is what the outcome that we want to see from creating those places that people really love.
Great. And so I guess in understanding that, and that you're an essential partner in that experience creation, you know, imagine I'm a tourism operator. I've got an idea, you know, I'm like, I really want to work with Cumulus, you know, they're really going to help me to deliver that experience. I guess I really want to understand what that sort of working with you looks like in terms of the expertise and services that you offer. And then what I could expect that, you know, I've got an idea. What does that process then in working with you look like? And at what point do I engage you?
Yeah, well, from our point, it's never too early for us to be engaged. I think that, you know, depending, every project is different, of course, but really some of our clients get us involved very, very early in the process. And that might be to help them find a site or help them understand if a site that they've got will work for them. It might be in helping them develop up some ideas for what their tourism operation is. A lot of our clients get us involved in working through the feasibility and developing up a business case for their product. So really, it's really early. Other clients come to us where they've already got an idea in mind and they're really quite clear on what they want to do. So in that case, it's a matter of really working with them to understand what their product is, what their ideas are, and working out how the architecture can really accentuate that and make it even better, and creating those amazing visitor experiences that we were talking about earlier. And so it's refining. Now, this diagram is one that we use quite a lot, and it just talks about that collaborative process that we have with all of our clients. It's at the very beginning, it's fairly loose process. It's all about collecting ideas. Our clients typically know a lot more about what their product is and their market than we do. So we need to really be receptive to understanding that from their point of view. We also rely on lots of other specialist consultants to input into the process about understanding the site and understanding engineering constraints and those sort of things. So that first process is really about research and collecting ideas, and then together we refine that through the concept and into a clear concept and develop it through. And as part of every project, we have an evaluation sort of feedback loop where we're getting information from our past clients and understanding what worked really well for them, what were the things that we should keep hold of and implement further for the next project, and what are the things that didn't really work. So trying to utilize that research stage to inform other projects. And that's why I think working with architects that have got a really good experience in those tourism type projects is beneficial to clients, because you're coming to the table with a wealth of experience from other projects. So there's sooner the better. Next slide, Anastasia. And this is just a really like a fairly it just maps out a little bit of what our process is, and we go through a number of sort of steps from that very big picture idea through and refinement. The initial stages are around concept and developing concept. Most projects have some sort of statutory planning approval stage, and then there's a refinement and taking that through to working with engineers and all sorts of specialist consultants through the construction documentation, getting that ready for a tender or to take to builders, so that we can get it priced and constructed. So it's a very linear process, and this sort of just gives an idea of when other consultants might be involved as well.
Right. So it sounds like you're really involved in that. You know, you're not just coming in at any sort of at a single design point, but you come in at that concept, and you're right there through that whole process, right to kind of doors opening and implementation.
Yeah, we can be. Most clients engage us in that way, that it's through the whole process. And we have we typically manage all of the other consultants for the client as well. So we are advising them on, because every site is different and all the constraints are different, and every project has different opportunities and challenges. So we're advising the client about what sort of other technical expertise they might need, and then feeding that into the process and getting the best out of those consultants in the way that they give their advice, and utilising consultants in a way that looks for opportunities rather than being held up on what the constraints might be.
Yeah. And so these are just some of the, on the screen now is obviously some of those other services and consultants that,
Yeah, yeah.
that, you know, that, because it is really difficult, you know, like it isn't a simple, I mean, it's a nightmare, isn't it, to say, I'm going to go on this project, because there are all of these different elements that you have to think about. You know, building, design and construction is not a, it feels like it's really simple, but it's actually not. It's a very complicated with lots of different players. And obviously, particularly, you know, in tourism, where you're really trying to create experiences in really unique places as well. And that obviously adds a level of complexity to that project. And so you guys can obviously bring that knowledge in terms of what you need to consider.
Absolutely, and the challenges for, let's say, an interior design renovation or refurbishment of an existing tourism operation, those challenges are really quite different to making a new product in a wilderness site where there might be bushfire constraints and you're looking at how to remotely construct something. So yeah, there's a whole range of things that we might have to consider, and we look at them specifically for that project rather than and bring that expertise to it.
Yeah, cool. We had a TKSA Tourism Summit just recently, and Emma Terry was obviously talking about when you've got a new place brand coming in and really looking, Emma Terry from the SATC, this is CNE, you know, really looking at the future of tourism. And, you know, we've seen a huge change over the last 10 years and then COVID, you know, and you know, that desire for meaning and purpose and experiences has really accelerated. You know, and Emma really, at one point, she sort of talked about the role that the visitor will have in really shaping experiences moving forward, because it does need to hit a lot of sort of values and purpose buttons of theirs. And she sort of mentioned that the future of accommodation was designed by you, the client. And I guess I just want to understand what your take is on that, because that sounds like, you know, it's a free-for-all design process by random people out there based on their likes. So I'd just like to unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting comment, and I can kind of understand some of, as Pete has mentioned, some of the technological advancements which make that a little bit more possible than in the past. I think sort of reiterating some of, I guess, our sentiments so far, I guess collaboration is kind of key in our experience to the success of the best projects. And our feeling is, whereas in the past, architects have obviously led the design process, and Emma was suggesting that might change in the future. I guess our feeling is that the role of a designer or an architect in tourism projects, I think, will continue to be a stabilising effect on the future prospects of new players and new opportunities and new experiences. I think where our skills come to the forefront and can't really be value managed is that ability to sort of understand brand, what's the unique proposition, how can we help and collaborate with a tourism operator to accentuate that. And perhaps in the past it was Pinterest, and tomorrow it will be AI tools. There's always going to be new tools for operators and for people who are not in the industry to sort of flesh out what their vision is. But I guess what we see is that, you know, our value is, and designer and architect's value is, I guess, that appreciation and ability to articulate experiences. And that we find can't be easily emulated by a developer or a project manager or a spreadsheet if it's left to the last minute.
Yeah, and I guess that's the benefit, you know, that for me, it's that real benefit, isn't it? That, you know, you do have you know, you aren't just focused, your expertise isn't just, in that design and that architecture space, but the experience of or the expertise of an architect now is really understanding that sort of sitting back and that very strategic helicopter view of what a full experience looks like, because the place that we operate in and that we do business in, it's not removed from the service or the experience that we're offering. It reinforces or it sets, it sets the tone of it, doesn't it? There's nothing worse than when you go to a place and you're expecting, a really, your vision of what that experience is going to be, and then it really conflicts with the environment in which you're having that experience in. I think sometimes we think of the architecture as just like the blank canvas, where really it's the artwork in many ways. And so I guess because of, because of your experience is really broad, and, you do work in tourism businesses, but you also have a really strong role to play in working with policymakers at different levels of government, local council feasibility studies and master planning and strategy development. And I think we kind of overlook the role that they actually play in an initial scene setting of a destination or a tourism environment. So can you just give us a couple of examples of your work in that area? And what you see as important strategy considerations for infrastructure and experience development, because no tourism business is an island, and it sits within a broader environment which can really impact.
Yeah, I think two recent examples of this. One particular project that we've just finished is our work up at Cradle Mountain. Cradle Mountain is one of Tasmania's premium tourism destinations. It's after Hobart and, say, Port Arthur, it's the third most visited spot in the state. And it, up until recently, until we started this project, it had a really, really poor infrastructure. Parks and Wildlife Services, who were our client, were very aware that they needed to upgrade the facilities, but and their vision was just for a new visitor centre. However, working with tourism consultants, we did a whole master plan for the site that looked at what the whole site could be, and that included a transport strategy. For those who know Cradle, there's the World Heritage Area, and there's 8 kilometres of sort of fairly poor access through the valley that take you from the visitor centre through to Dove Lake. And so we looked at access strategies, how to get into the World Heritage Area, how to bring people to the site. There's poor accommodation for staff. There's not much in the way of staff facilities or accommodation for staff. So we looked at a staff village and how the whole site could evolve over time. Looked at how there could be private-public sort of partnership arrangements to evolve the site. And so out of this whole collection master planning process, we also, there was an idea that was developed for sort of a cable car tourism elevated transport system to go through into the World Heritage Area. That was demand tested to see what that would have as impact, along with some other new structures, etc., what that would do for visitation to the area. Then that whole demand study formed a business case that was the basis for inviting commercial operators onto the site to develop the site as well. So in the end, that piece of work resulted in, I think it was about, from memory, $80 million worth of government funding being devoted to the site. And much of that has been spent already in providing underlying site infrastructure, a new visitor centre, a new shelter at Dove Lake. Some of that is still yet to be expended, but that infrastructure that was put in place then forms the basis for other developers to come on board as well and utilise that as part of the evolution of the site. So that was a really important piece of work that actually started from a small idea and grew into something much bigger through doing through doing a lot of that strategy work that you sort of referred to. And the second project that we've got here is a piece of work that we did for one of the local regional tourism up in the northwest coast of Tasmania, and it was a piece of work that was intended to look at some new destinations that we could create. We did a whole heap of consultation work with local stakeholders and local tourism operators. We spent a whole heap of time up in the northwest coast of Tasmania looking at sites, etc., and brainstorming what types of tourism developments could take place. Out of a possible list of around 10 that we developed up with the community, we then demand tested 2 of those. This one that's on the screen was probably the most way out of those. It was an idea for a lookout that was off the cliffs. Tasmania experienced some of the strongest winds in the world, and the idea was for a lookout that was what we called a wave breaker, that had the waves kind of crashing against the glass, so you could experience the full force of the roaring 40s kind of in this lookout. So this demand tested extremely well. This was one of 2 projects that we ran through the demand testing. This resulted in $17 million worth of government funding being devoted to the 2 projects. $1 million of that was to further develop up a feasibility for this project, and the other project received the remainder of that, again, to put in place infrastructure that could then support a public-private development of the site. So that was, the other project was much more around nature-based tourism, a venture hub, and 4-wheel driving accommodation based in the trees and camping sites, etc. So that was a much more family-oriented sort of adventure kind of activities. And so, yeah, so those are types of projects that we really love being involved in. That they are ones where we get to do some really exciting sort of thinking, blue sky thinking in lots of ways. But then it's also, there's a process of really putting some rigor around what the cost of doing the developments might be versus the expected demand for those types of products, and working up a business case with others so that you can actually put forward a really good economic reasoning for why these developments might be good to go ahead, and then seeing government kind of come in and start backing those is really exciting for us as well.
I think we may have also had another example as well for the local context, Linda, which was just talking to the fact that in recent years, since we've been in Adelaide and working in SA more broadly, we've also been doing some work on some public infrastructure visitor experience analyses, and one of those has been Granite Island, which we undertook with Department of Environment and Water back in 2021. And if you just go back to that slide again, sorry, Anastasia, I guess similar to what Pete, I guess, outlined with Cradle Mountain, all the complex projects really need to start with kind of really honing in on what the key ideas are and what the key strategies are, to be able to actually benchmark if the project's going to be successful. So for us, as we have considered so far with Granite Island, it's really enhancing that sense of arrival and thinking about that, what's the opportunities longer term for South Australia in terms of the northern foreshore. Given there's questions again with Granite Island around sensibility of obviously flora and fauna, we're also, I guess, well versed in trying to understand how we will rectify and work with those aspects as part of a built infrastructure solution. If you keep stepping through that, Anastasia. And then from those sort of part of what we kind of call, like, I guess, more broad stroke visions or high level strategy ideas, that allows us as architects and designers to sort of flesh out what those opportunities are in a more refined architectural sense, and actually start to think about what the prioritization aspects are in collaboration with a client group. And then from here, we can take those ideas into, I guess, a 3-dimensional form. What maybe we haven't touched on so far is obviously within architectural services, there's different thresholds of visualization. Some of the images we've shown today are visualizations where the client may decide to spend actually and invest some money in the visualization of a project, and that can be for marketing purposes, that could be for funding. In this case, given the project's at a very preliminary stage, it's quite common that and should be expected that a designer or architect is preparing three-dimensional views of a project in a preliminary sense, that you can kind of share the ideas at the scale and the kind of broad vision that's possible for a project site in terms of how it relates to the location and also the look and feel of the infrastructure. So that's something that's also in progress for us.
I'm really struck, I guess, when you're talking about this process, and I really, we talk about the visitor journey in tourism in terms of there's various stages to that. There's not just the purchase stage, there's not just the build stage with architecture as well, or projects. That there's very much, it all starts at a dreaming stage, and I think what you're talking about here is very much dreaming stages and your role within exploring, brainstorming, blue sky thinking, and then really it really does follow very much that similar kind of visitor journey. I'm dreaming, I'm thinking then about what's actually really possible. Then I'm planning. Then I'm doing very much the technical side of it. So it's a very matched kind of process in a way. And I think it's really great too that your experience, it really does sit in a space of you can work with individual operators. I'm very, linear, sort of much more simple in terms of streamline or smaller, narrower focus projects, but then also to this, this really big destination piece where you are thinking more contextually and holistically and working with different stakeholders as well around, what is the role of creating visitor spaces and places where people interact and with environment and learn and come together and all of that sort of stuff. It's all really exciting, and we are also familiar with Granite Island here in South Australia, and I think we all talk about its potential, whether you're in the industry or not in the industry, just going over it. So, hopefully at some point in time we can really see these, what you've proposed here, be fleshed out into that space. So it really does, what you're doing is really allowing those destinations to live up to their full potential, and certainly some of that stuff in Tasmania, Peter, that wave breaker. Wow. What an amazing concept. Like, what a way to experience, and I'm going completely off track here, but what a way. Often we're so used to lookouts and looking down onto waves, but to actually have that opportunity to be really immersed in the impact of that force in that way. I think it's, we're so used to, we can go underwater to swim with crocodiles and sharks and that sort of stuff, but to actually just experience the force of nature through a built concept's really really exciting. And on that, sorry, just as I ramble about opportunities, you guys have been involved in some really impressive projects and iconic projects in Tasmania, and I certainly, my love for Cumulus was sparked even before I had the opportunity to work with you guys, just by seeing some of the projects that you were working on. And it's really funny, I've had friends that have travelled to Tasmania and they actually take photos, not because the Instagram moments that you talked about, but they take photos of your architecture, and I see it on their Facebook and Instagrams and all of that sort of stuff. And it's not because they're like, this is beautiful, but they're capturing their experience in that space, and they want to share that experience because of what you guys have designed and created has done for them when they've gone to those locations. So I guess, Cradle Mountain, as you said, Devil's Corner, Settled Door, Pump House Point, God, what an opportunity to work with that type of a building in that type of a location. It's kind of, but without being too crude, that's kind of my wet dream, really, like... What an opportunity. Among many, how has Cumulus's work transformed the overall visitor experience and developed these businesses as destinations in their own right?
Yeah, well, I think coming back to what you were saying, it really does start with that dreaming part of the project. I mean, every site is different, every project is different, every client is different, but the ones that have been the most successful in our view are the ones where clients have been really open to what the possibilities might be at the beginning and had taken both given had the trust in us and also the openness to sitting down with us and really exploring what those opportunities might be. This one that's on the screen at the moment, this is Devil's Corner. It's a cellar door that we did up the East Coast. But this started, the client for this is Brown Brothers. They started with a very simple idea of wanting a new cellar door for their Devil's Corner label, and with working with them and again some other tourism advisors, we were able to take that idea of putting what they wanted was something that would put the brand first, and we actually inverted it and made the experience come first. So the idea became, let's create a lookout that's a public piece of infrastructure. It's free for everybody. It's very visual, and people can see it as they're driving past, and it attracts people into the site. Anybody can use it. And then when you're in the site, then you see that there's this collection of other buildings. There's local food and local wine that you can have. It's a collection of like very small agricultural type buildings that serve food and wine, has great lookout. And so once you're there, you start have this experience of collecting around in these spaces. It becomes a beautiful space to actually spend the afternoon with friends and family. You're in this beautiful location. And then that feeds back into a receptiveness to actually engage with the brand. So once you've got this beautiful experience, then you're being able to engage with the brand in a different way. And at the same time, the architecture has become part of the branding of the product. So if you see a poster for Devil's Corner, it's often got the lookout as part of it, which was never part of the original idea. So I think that that's a really kind of a clear way in which we really understood what their brand values were, and then created a product that was not about the brand, it was about the experience, but then that in turn reinforced what the brand wanted to do.
It's beautiful stuff. It's, yeah, you can really see in these images how it's creating the experience, and it's, and then everything else that then, how do people move through that site? How do they get the set? Like it's so, it really demonstrates that it is the script of the play that is the theatre, I should say, of the visitor experience. So
yeah, and it came out of a lot of conversation. It came out of a lot of conversations with the client, and a lot of backwards and forwards and brainstorming and thinking outside the square. This also went through a demand testing process. So we tested it at the beginning to see how people would respond to it, and it did extremely well. And not surprisingly, the whole development was extremely successful. So much so that we recently did an extension to it to accommodate about another 100 seating areas.
Yeah, and that demand testing, I think, is really important, because a lot of people don't think of that when they're thinking around what they want to do. Like, this is my passion, this is the experience I want to create. And then obviously too, once you start getting into the design phase as well, you can really get caught up in the emotion and the enthusiasm of what that's going to represent, or you can see it, you can feel it, but then to sort of step back from that and actually put it out to a demand scenario, so you do have confidence, that you're not just caught up in your own passion, but you are actually delivering something. It's a great addition to that process, or that a great reassurance that the spend is going to really be worth it. So based on that previous experience that you've got, and we're going to talk a little bit more about, South Australia a little bit later on, but just based on your previous experience, and Jet, obviously you're based in the Adelaide office here, so working very much in the South Australian market, but just, what's the pipeline for SA and what are the opportunities at the moment?
Yeah, thanks, Linda. Yeah, well, for us at the moment, we're currently working on some really exciting projects within that nature-based space. We currently have a project that we're undertaking at Cape Willoughby with DEW, which Department of Environment and Water, which involves actually undertaking adaptation of the old cafe that was at Cape Willoughby. And so that's a really exciting project in that it kind of blends, obviously, developing new visitor infrastructure, but also kind of considering at that broader scale what the visitor experience would be at Cape Willoughby into the future, and how can we, I guess, combine the kind of heritage experiences of the lighthouse keeper cottages with a contemporary experience and a contemporary interpretation of some of the artifacts and history that is at the site. So that's something that we're really excited, that's currently sort of in the early stages of concept design. Beyond our work with government, which we touched on here, and then with Granite Island, we've also got some private work in the tourism space. One aspect which I guess also follows on from our discussion earlier around master planning and our work at sort of those micro and macro scales is a proposal at Wellington East for some tourism accommodation at the Wellington Marina site. That kind of involved working with a private client, but also negotiating with the local council on how we could develop the private portions of that land, and also address some public zones, public reserve zones that are associated with that client site. And then from there, stepping through with the client actually developing a planning proposal and then actual building proposals for the site. And these are just some 3D images that we undertook during the kind of planning phase for that. For these tourism accommodation pods, and I guess this also speaks to the idea that a project like this requires a huge amount of collaboration and team effort. So it's not just an architect coming up with a vision; it's working closely with the client and also working with other consultants, in particular on this project, those who have natural values specialisation, to assess how we can actually achieve the ideas while being also sustainable. Another one I might share before kind of moving on is also Ponderosa, which is some tourism accommodation that's in progress up at Flora Peninsula, which some of you may be familiar with just from, I guess, some other reports that have been out there about this one. So we're doing adaptations to an existing cottage for tourism use, and also developing a collection of pod accommodation elements on the site. So there's the cottage plus 5 unique pods, which again kind of was around working with a client to assess what's the best placement for those pieces of infrastructure, and then also how do you maintain a sense of unique visitor experience across a single site, albeit a large one. So yeah, this is sort of where we love to kind of to be working, is in those really unique and aspirational projects, and projects that obviously take a lot of work to move from concept planning and then actually making them feasible to get them to site and to construction, which is where we're currently at with Ponderosa at the moment, at the construction stage about to begin.
Wow, they are all really exciting projects for so many different reasons, and yeah, can't wait to see them continue and develop. And Cape Willoughby especially, that's really my jam, the heritage space, and really excited about what's possible there as well.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that I'm interested, sustainability, demonstrating that we're a sustainable, regenerative, all of that sort of stuff, they're terms that are becoming really important. They have been really important in tourism, and they're becoming even more and more important, not just in terms of the experience that's created, but also to the business and the operation that sits behind those experiences. And Cumulus is a B Corp certified business, and certainly B Corps, there's different scorecards and demonstrations within tourism, and B Corp's one of them. So I just want to understand how that influences the way that you operate as a business, and also your collaboration with stakeholders, because you do work with such a broad sort of stakeholder base.
Yeah, we never really set out initially to be B Corp certified, but there were so many things that we aligned with the types of things that they assessed, that we thought that it was it just made sense. But first and foremost, I guess it's about the fact that as a business, we want to make a positive, lasting contribution to the communities that we live in. It's not just about like being profitable, obviously is important, but it's also about how we can feed back into the community, and that we want to be making positive difference through architecture. That means that, as you touched on, there's a large amount of consultation that needs to take place. Now, all different projects have different requirements, but a lot of the projects we work on are on public land. And so a consultation with Indigenous groups is really important to us. We have gone through the process of developing our reconciliation action plan. We, on public projects, we always try to get involved Aboriginal community advisors that are Aboriginal-led teams and Aboriginal-owned organisations involved in those, so that there's an opportunity for them to be involved not only in guiding the project, but also from a financial point of view in developing up their communities. Our sustainability action plan is something that we've also spent a lot of time on as well. So, and we've got key indicators that we're trying to put in place in terms of increasing the environmental performance of all of our projects. That's really important to us. And then some of these images that are coming through at the moment are from the implementation of some of those things as well, in terms of particularly with those public projects, about telling some of the stories of the site, or telling, and in this case, some of those stories are Aboriginal stories, and some of them are, this one's Cradle, so it's about the World Heritage values, so the values of the landscape that you're living in. And I guess part of the reason that we like being involved in those projects is that through allowing people to experience these places, there's much more of an understanding of why these environments are really important to protect. I think the other thing that really probably is something that we are trying to do much more of, and we have done in the past, is that we actually include our team at a very high level in trying to make decisions about the types of projects that we take on. So even just the other day, we raised a project that had come forward and wanted to get our team's feedback on whether we as a group felt that was in line with the types of values that we had. So we were really trying to make sure that the projects that we do, there's an opportunity for architects to lead and to create those positive influences that we were talking about.
And I might just throw to you sort of an extension of that, you know, that role of sustainability, regenerative values, integrity, all of that sort of stuff. And also this just comes from a market demand place for us as well. But inclusive and accessible tourism is increasingly important. It's no longer something that you should want to do, but you should always want to do it, but it's becoming much more of a hygiene factor within tourism now. So I just want to understand that this is a space, you know, understand your perspective on sort of this, how you approach accessibility, inclusion in the projects that you work on, and any advice that you might have for operators.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. I guess as we've touched on today, it really depends on the scale of the proposition. So in our projects, typically, if it involves a new development, that's going to require a designer or architect to really consider how does the proposal meet regulatory requirements for accessibility. And so that's something I guess operators need to be considering and cognizant to if they're wanting to undertake significant development for a project. At the other end of the spectrum, if an operator has existing operations, existing infrastructure, then I guess the onus is on the operator to really understand place, both at that inclusivity aspect of sort of engaging with the site, but also at that accessibility angle of can I do better, and is there more that can be done with the existing to make it fit for purpose and deemed to satisfy against current requirements? So architects and designers have got those skills to help operators understand the mandatory requirements or what's expected of them in managing accessibility. But it does, obviously, like we've pointed out, with the design process and the process of developing the sorts of projects we're involved in, it does really require that buy-in from the client group early on, that there's, yes, there's things that are nice to do, but then there's the things that really must be done to make what is essentially in tourism, ultimately public infrastructure, fit for purpose and accessible to all.
Right. And just to plug, I think for the client and for the operator, and when they're coming to you on that, and a plug for us, so one of our programs, we run accessible tourism accreditation, and part of that is a self-assessment checklist where you can kind of see where your business is at or where your environment is at across 5 different accessibility modules, and then what you could then do to sort of really enhance and deliver a high level of accessibility inclusion. And that's probably, you don't have to have your project finished to start that first checklist. It's probably something that could happen in discussion with you guys when you're like, so what is the, how far is it from the car park to the entryway? What are our provisions for hearing impaired? Because we do know if you build it in at the beginning of your project, it saves you significant money and delivers you better return on investment than if you.
That's right. Yeah.
So, yeah. So I think.
And to that point, Linda, I think it's worth acknowledging that again, architects aren't kind of silos in this process. We can with a client and with a tourism operator assess whether it's essentially feasible to make those changes within the framework of their project, and where there's situations where there's particular site constraints or building constraints whereby it wouldn't be possible to meet something I deem to satisfy a requirement for accessibility, then that's where we would recommend a specialist in the a DDA specialist, DDA consultant could actually provide that additional layer of support to the operator to essentially assess, well, what would be a really great outcome to get as close as possible to meeting what would be seen as a deemed to satisfy solution.
Great. Now, I'm just conscious that we are getting short on time, and I know we've got a question from Susan online, but I guess I just want to, just before we go there, just go a bit of quick sort of big sky thinking that you've talked about. Obviously, Cumulus is really well established within the Tasmanian tourism environment. And you've worked a lot with industry there. You've worked with our equivalent over there. You've worked with the SATC equivalent over there. And I guess just from what you've seen in Tassie, Jet, you're the South Aussie here with, the local knowledge, but also Pete, you come with that, you've seen what can be done. What do you see as some of the big opportunities for SA's tourism industry?
Yeah, well, I guess the main ones, which obviously align really well with our experience in Tasmania, is nature-based tourism, and I guess as been discussed at the recent TICSA Tourism Summit, for us that's obviously an area that we feel we can help assist in sort of driving that sense of what's unique about the South Australian context and in the South Australian landscape. Some really tangible areas, obviously, where we see opportunities would be with what's happening and being discussed at the moment around dark sky reserve opportunities out at the Mid-Murray region. Obviously, we've raised today, we see some really great opportunities with places like Granite Island, whereby there's some other recent investments that have occurred that would really facilitate enhancing that location. And I guess as Emma and others talked about at the summit, wine, food, produce related, events related infrastructure, I think is going to continue to be an area of sort of burgeoning need for continued investment if SA wants to continue to be on the forefront in that part of the kind of visitor experience economy. I'm sure Pete will have perhaps more he could add to that from his expressions of, or impressions, sorry, of the local context.
Well, mine would probably be a sales pitch to engage us to do work to help explore some of those, what those opportunities might be. But yeah, no, I think it's covered a lot of it. I mean, the obvious ones are around a lot of those food and wine type opportunities that SA is so well known for.
And just a question from Susan. She's really interested in hearing what, and I think this might play into where we think about SA too. Interested in hearing what some of the greatest challenges you face as architects in terms of getting tourism outcomes.
I think that main one, which we've touched on today, is that I guess tourism operators and people who are wanting to be in that space need to recognise that there is a value in having specialist input. It doesn't always require architects or designers to be involved through the whole process. Ideally, we are, but with our services, I guess there's also always the challenge of tourism operators understanding that it isn't a one-stop shop. There are other important players, whether it's bushfire assessment, accessibility consultants, engineers. These are all people that are part of the process, and the biggest problem we would have working in the tourism space is often it's trying to align the kind of consultant requirements with the client's vision, and then it kind of explaining what's required from that consultancy level to pull off the big idea.
Yeah, I'd also say that, every project has, I've not come across any project yet that does not have budget constraints, and costs are really, our vision, our ability to have a vision that's bigger than what we can afford is not unique to anybody really, and it's one of the exciting things is being able to have those big ideas, but then it's how do you implement them. And a lot of times every challenge is an opportunity, so it's looking at what and a lot of them, I mean, one example that springs to mind immediately is we're working with a tourism operator, accommodation operator at the moment. Their idea in the back of their mind was that their market required a room of 60 square meters because they were in this luxury space. And working with, that was going to be an extremely expensive proposition on the wilderness site that they wanted. And so working with them, we were actually able to go to refine what was the experience that they were paying for. And it wasn't, their market wasn't paying for the room size. They were paying for the experience of being on that site and the unique qualities of that site. So we could really pull down the size of the space and make it much more intimate, and make and really think about it in a high quality design way that led to still working within the budget that they needed to, but changing what the experience was and some of those preconceptions of what they thought might be important to their clients at the beginning.
Great. We've got 2 minutes left, so I'm going to, I guess, any sort of I mean, I feel like that's really wrapped it up beautifully in terms of the value that you bring within the, the environment that we work in within tourism. But is there any kind of final, thing that you want to our listeners, viewers, our community to walk away with?
Yeah, well, I guess just on that point of collaboration, I guess that's the key for us. That's where the goal is for us, is having those conversations with members, with tourism operators to understand what the opportunities are. Also interested to hear and yeah, now or in the future hear from members on what they consider those opportunities to be for South Australia, because yeah, we're really excited about the future for South Australia, and see that this is there's kind of a sense and sentiment of yeah, really great prospects for the years ahead in SA.
Excellent. Well, I'm really pleased that to have Cumulus as one of our partners to have that conversation with our industry, and the fact that you really recognise the role that firms such as yourselves play within the tourism landscape as well, and see yourself as part of our industry. And thank you. It's been a great session. I'm sure you know, we'll share this recording with everyone. I know not so much Peter because he's in Tasmania, but Jet and Anastasia often come along to our events, so make sure you hit them up when you do see them. You know, I think what's great is that conversation, and that, you know, it's never too soon to just start talking, or even just to mind the creative genius that architects bring to the world. And certainly too, if you are getting down to Tassie, and you know, Pump House Point is on my bucket list and has been for a number of years, and yeah, if people are getting down to Tassie, you know, that you may not see Peter, but go and explore some of the work that Cumulus has done to really appreciate how you can just really elevate. And architecture doesn't have to be fancy. Functional, simple architecture that you don't even really notice. Wow, French kiss for a visitor experience as well. So, so thank you guys. Thank you everyone. Please contact us if you've got any more questions. We'll share Cumulus's details. And 12:01, bang. Enjoy your day, everyone.
Thanks
very
all.
much.
Thanks, Linda.